following announcement has been paid for by the WZWA Network.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Insiders Edge podcast here on the WZWA Network. I'm your host with the most on the West Coast, Karlifornia Inferior. A joy, honor, and privilege to be with you all once again. And as usual, speaking of a joy, honor, and privilege, right here, right now, I get to speak to a man. He's been a promoter extraordinaire, a manager extraordinaire, a commentator extraordinaire. He's worn many hats in his time in the pro wrestling business. He's the one, he's the only, the incomparable Mr. Ron Niemi. How are you, sir?
Thank you. I'm pretty excited about doing this. I talked to a lot of my buddies that have done stuff with me in the past, like Jet Jaguar and me and Mike from Disorderly Conduct. And, you know, they did nothing but put over the interview that you did with them. So I was excited to do it myself.
Yeah, awesome. Well, that's great. It's good to have some people in my corner, and there's certainly been people in your corner too, sir, because I've had quite a lot of guys on the show that have been a part of IWA Hardcore Wrestling. IPW Hardcore Wrestling. See, I told you it was early in the morning for me. IPW Hardcore Wrestling and a lot of Florida guys. So very excited to learn about your journey because, you know, yours is a little bit differently. These guys, you've worn, as I said, many hats in pro wrestling. But before we get to all that stuff, usually the first question on the show, Ron, is how did you become a wrestling fan before you got involved in the business?
I grew up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and I used to stay at my grandparents' all the time. And I remember us coming home one night after a fish fry at the VFW or something like that. And late night, I turned into this station out of Green Bay, and All-Star Wrestling was on. And it was the AWA. Nick Bockwinkel was the world heavyweight champion at the time. And you had the likes of Mad Dog Vachon, the high flyers, Jim Brunzell and Greg Gagne, just Ken Patera, Mr. Saito, some of the greatest of the great. And as soon as I saw it, from the second I saw it, I was hooked. And I've always loved professional wrestling. When I seen Bobby Heenan shortly after that, because he was the manager of the world champ, Nick Bockwinkel, I knew that was what I wanted to do. But growing up where I did and being in the middle of nowhere in Upper Michigan, I didn't think there would ever be a chance that I could ever find my way into the business. So it's been like living a dream.
Yeah, that's really cool. It rings true through almost everyone I've had on the show. The moment they saw it, they were hooked, and then that was it. It was a foregone conclusion. Their life would now be about this. So that's where you're kind of situated in the US at the time. As far as your wrestling fandom is concerned, before you finally figure out a way to get involved in the business, was there a point in time where you first saw kind of more of a hardcore style of wrestling? I know that IPW was, you know, kind of like a Florida version of ECW. Some guys have you know, explained to me in previous interviews. Was there, you know, that element of your fandom? Where did that first start?
The whole element of violence, and especially it wouldn't involve color, just right from the beginning hooked me. I'll always remember angles when I was watching the AWA where simple, you can find it on YouTube even, where Baron Von Raschke and Kenny the Sodbuster J, who was a long time like weekly job guy on the AWA show, for whatever reason, they teamed up against Mr. Saito and Jesse the Body Ventura, who were known as the Far East West Connection at the time. And there was an angle where they busted a board over Baron Von Raschke's head and just insane color, blood everywhere. And then a few years later, I started getting access to the Memphis tapes. And I was lucky enough that I was also getting tapes from Calgary with Stampede Wrestling, the Hart family, because Makan Singh was the North American champion. And at the time in Calgary, he also happened to be a Youper, which is what we call people from the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, or Youpers. So he was like our local hometown hero. he also happened to be best friends with a guy that was married to one of my aunts. So I was getting tapes from Canada with the likes of a Young Benoit, Dynamite Kid, Davey Boy Smith, Hase, Sasaki, the Horts. I was getting educated to this totally different style and world of wrestling. And when they ran angles up there, especially when it involved emotion and personal situations, that there was a lot of blood. It always registered to me in a bigger way when the blood was involved, and it seemed that much more serious. And as I came up in professional wrestling, I always incorporated the violence, the blood, the controversy. What Paul Heyman was doing, I was doing on a smaller level. And he was an inspiration for me. And so was Jim Cornette with Smoky Mountain Wrestling, because I dare you to find more controversial and crazy or violent stuff than the Heavenly Bodies and the Gangstas from the days in Smoky Mountain. I mean, I couldn't get enough of it. So once I started running shows and I started to be involved more as a manager, and whenever we'd do blow-off matches where the babyface would finally get their hands on me, I would leave in a bloody massacre. I wouldn't be seen for another month or so. And that worked because I was active duty Air Force at the time. So I would take leave every time I knew that these big blow-offs were going to happen. I'd get murdered. I'd vanish. Actually, I'd be up in Upper Michigan with all my friends. And then I'd come back with a neck brace or a hood, or take your pick of different things. I like old school stuff, but I like the violence to go with it.
Awesome. Interesting stuff. Especially, just getting tapes of Stampede back then must have been mind-blowing seeing.
It was unbelievable. There was so much talent there. And Mike Shaw, which was the wrestler out of the UP that wrestled as Makan Singh, later would have been Norman the Lunatic in WCW and Bastion Booger in the WWF, to see what was going on up there, and to see a lot of these guys right before WWF would snatch him up, guys like Bad News Brown, he's Bad News Allen at the time. And again, the Hearts, Jim the Anvil Neidhart, so much talent was up there. And they were also light years ahead of their time, especially when it came to like the tag team division, with the Japanese talent mixing with, very young Owen and Bruce and Bret Hart, and of course the Bulldogs. And it was just a loaded territory.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, it certainly was cutting edge stuff. Okay, so that's kind of we've covered kind of your fandom there and where things kind of led to finding a way to get involved with the wrestling business. What was the first step? How did you figure it out?
I got stationed at MacDill Air Force Base in Tampa when I was 19. It was the first base that they assigned me to. As soon as I got off the plane, and this sergeant picked me up at Tampa International Airport, I told him he needed to bring me to the Tampa Sportatorium, and I had the address, which was 106 North Albany in Tampa, Florida. All I wanted to see, all I cared about, was going to the Tampa Sportatorium, where the likes of Dusty Rhodes, Kevin Sullivan, Abdul the Butcher, Terry Funk, Steve Kern, the Briscoes, Mike Graham. I could go on and on. It was like a shrine to professional wrestling to me. When I arrived at the building, it was this dump. It was this little tiny dump of a building. I didn't care. All I wanted to do was get in that building. And sure enough, they were still running every Thursday night at the time. And there were still legends like Dick Slater, Robert Fuller, the Harris brothers would be there, Kern, Brian Blair, you take your pick. I just got dropped in here. And I kept coming every week to the Sportatorium, where Steve Kern would train talent, Jimmy Del Rey, which was Jimmy Backlund at the time. And then also across town, the Malenko School of Wrestling ran classes. I just kept going to both, and they'd keep chasing me off. And when they weren't chasing me off, they were beating the shit out of me and stretching me. But I couldn't get enough of it. So I just kept coming back until they finally allowed me on the shows as a heel manager, because I'm not even 5'6", and I was really, really tiny and little at the time because I didn't lift. So the idea that I could be anything other than a pussy heel manager was unheard of. But the great Malenko gave me the opportunity. And then guys like Billy Mack at the Sportatorium gave me opportunities, and I was off and running.
Right. Awesome. So in my research, I did see that you had worked a little bit in the ring. I saw the name Sir Ronald J. Niemi IV. I wanted to know a little bit about that character.
That was my first gimmick I went with when I was getting rolling. I'm actually Ronald James Niemi Jr. and my son is the third, but I always liked the idea of Sir Oliver Humperdinck was this just redheaded slob, dressed in these ridiculous clothes, and he was such an obnoxious jerk. And he would claim this royal lineage. And here I am, I'm this 5'6" pipsqueak. And I got this ridiculous, to this day, I got this really strong accent that people usually associate with Canada, because I grew up only a few hours away from there. So I thought the idea of me claiming that I had some loose, weird royal lineage while I'm out there just acting like an asshole, interfering in every match I can, I figured it would be obnoxious. And then I'd combine it with the really gaudy, ridiculous over-the-top suits, kind of like Cornette used to wear back in the day. And that took off to people would call. I was so tiny, and I'd be dressed like Pee Wee Herman. So Pee Wee is exactly what took off. So I'd have molten white hot heat on these shows with the whole place chanting Pee Wee. And I'm just wondering the whole time, how the fuck did I even sneak in here?
That is great stuff. I do a lot of deep dive research. When I do my research, the internet can be wrong sometimes, but sometimes I could be pleasantly surprised. Did I read correctly that you did some extra work for WCW during an angle with Hogan and Sid as a security guard?
Yeah, we were on, I think it was Thunder. Me and some of my friends, Rick Thames, who used to be seen a lot with the Southern Posse on WCW Saturday Night, Jeff Bradley, who was Dudley in ECW and has traveled worldwide. He's been over to Europe and Australia, Japan, China. He was there with me, my buddy Mike Peskin, Casey Thompson, a few others that we were like, it was a Thunder deal. And they involved us with this pull apart brawl that, if I remember right, was Tank Abbott, Ming, Sid Vicious, and Hulk Hogan, where it was this weird, crazy deal. And we were involved in a pull apart. Then there was an interview backstage with Sid where he was like giving us orders where we were clearly on his payroll. And that was like in the height of where they were just like pissing money away. And every one of us got paid $500, which don't seem like much now. And some of the folks on the indies are making money, and I'm very happy and proud of what it's become. But at the time, to get a $500 payday, if you were doing jobs on WCW Saturday Night, you were looking to get $150, and you'd have to cut in whoever got you booked a booking fee plus split trans and do whatever after that and party, and you'd be broke on the way home. So to get $500 to play security when Eric Bischoff was getting things rolling there was insane, and it was a lot of fun. And truthfully, we were treated really good. But I wish I had done more at that level, because to get a taste of that, even, I know it might not sound like much, but to get a $500 payday when you were grinding on the indies, to lucky to get $50 if it was a good show. It was like, hey man, I made it. I'm with Sid and Hulk. Something's going to happen here, and that's it. It can happen. For the good for you that bad, or you can be chasing. I've been doing this shit for 30 years, man. I broke in August of '91. I've always, kept a shoot job. And like I said, I was active duty military during the first 7 years of that. But, I've been on the cusp of things a million times. I always like to, I don't want to say it's an excuse, but I'm probably lucky I didn't make it, because I like the party inside of this business a lot too. I don't know why anybody would go into professional wrestling or be a rock star or do anything like that if you're not in it for the insanity too. But that may have held me back a few times in my career, because I kind of embraced the idea of being completely impossible to deal with. It created a lot of excitement and would get us a lot of attention, but it also, I think, scared people away from taking a chance with me.
Fair enough, and very honest of you, but I do definitely appreciate that, and I can understand where you're coming from there, because I too like to party. Okay, IPW Hardcore Wrestling. I want to know, forming the company, what is the hardest part about starting your own company? What made you think, I want to start my own organization? And
I kind of got lucky at the time. Again, I've always had I guess for good and bad, I'm a wrestling snob, and I don't want to be associated with trash. And I don't want pretenders on the shows that I'm booked at. A lot of people would say it's not my business, but I don't want to be associated with garbage. If you're buying a ticket and you worked all week, and you decide you want to come out and bring the kids or some of the boys and come and see a show, they should see top level, guys with gear, guys that understand that it's time to be TV ready at all times and to be training and in the gym. We're in Florida, the sun is free. Look like a star. Treat the fans with some respect. And I didn't get that feeling that on a lot of the shows I was on. So I decided it was time to do my own thing. And I had a very good friend, Mike Peskin, who's still a good friend of mine. Actually, he was at AEW last night in Texas, having the time of his life. And he's been around this shit almost 40 years now. But he ran IPW in the Northeast, and he ran it in Florida. And before you even knew guys like British Bulldog or take your pick of talent, Hercules, Greg the Hammer Valentine, before you would even know they were released by the WWF, Mike would be running indie shows in the middle of these states, in the middle of nowhere with this talent. He always had a inside track on who was available and running bigger indie shows. Well, he was done. He liked me. I liked him. And he turned the book over to me. And I immediately turned it into just a fucking circus. In the back, in the ring, in the parking lot. It was wild, really, really wild. And while he trusted me and loved me, he just didn't want the, honestly, liability and the potential issues of running something like that. So he literally turned it over to me. I'm not even going to say there was a sale, or he was just a class act that always made a lot of money in his shoot job and never needed the wrestling to do it. So he just handed it over to me, and I was off and running. I mean, we were doing some crazy, crazy shit right from the beginning. And once I brought in Jet Jaguar and the Shane brothers, guys like Mike Sullivan, Scoot Andrews, whatever, I just brought in every star, singles guy, cruiserweight guy, and tag team to do nothing but put my guys over. And I sent them all over the world. Every indie that had any name value, if they would have us, we went. CZW, Jersey All Pro, ECWA, Wildside. And I also sent my guys to England with Stu over there running EWW. We sent guys to Big Japan Pro Wrestling, IWA Puerto Rico, World Wrestling Council in Puerto Rico. We sent guys to China. As a matter of fact, we had a guy that trained with some of my top guys, the Shanes in Jet Jaguar, from Australia, John Saru. He ended up being a star on the Australian version of American Gladiators as Vulcan. And he also
Vulcan.
and he had a really cool role in one of the James Bond movies where he got all kinds of screen time. And I don't remember, I might have it right here. I was looking it up earlier, but he was in The World Is Not Enough, where he plays this henchman, Gobor, badass dude. Came over here, trained at the Malenko School of Wrestling underneath Jeff Bradley. Dean Malenko still some had him, but that was my little tie to Australia that I forget sometimes about John, because it's been over 20 years. But he ended up being a star over in Australia. So wrestling's a very weird, small world. And now with the internet and things like we're doing here right now, it kind of shrinks down where learning the history is a little bit easier,
Absolutely, absolutely. And after all the names that you have mentioned on the show, as soon as you said Vulcan, I popped more for that name than anyone else. He was fantastic.
That's my boy.
He was fantastic on television. He played the heel so good on Gladiators. Gladiators was huge.
He's great looking, Fijian guy, badass, true athlete. I believe he opened up a wrestling school in Australia later on that lasted for. It may be still open, but I know it was upwards of 20 years the last I looked. But yeah, he's a good friend. I haven't seen him in a long time, but now that I'm bringing him up here, I'll probably look him up on one of the social media and say hi. He was always very close with the Shane brothers. They were kind of like all freak athletes with a different work ethic than your normal type of person. But yeah, it was very cool to see him become a star over there. He would have did the same thing here, as far as I'm concerned.
Absolutely. Speaking of the history of IPW Hardcore, I know that this is kind of a tough question to answer, because I really don't want to skim through it too much, but I have so much I want to ask you about. This question is, if you could tell me some of the biggest and proudest moments that you had as a booker for IPW Hardcore.
Easily the proudest moment, but it was also probably the saddest, is after Jeff Peterson passed away from lymphoma, and we put together the first annual Jeff Peterson Memorial Cup, where a very young CM Punk came to Florida for the first time. Colt Cabana came to Florida for the first time. One of the greatest wrestlers ever, as far as I'm concerned, Reckless Youth, won the tournament. But right as we were in the middle of that tournament, I was standing outside the Florida WrestlePlex in St. Pete with a bunch of my guys. And, you know, you're trying to have the best time you can. So we're raising hell like we normally do. And these incredible matches are happening inside the building. And all of a sudden, this huge, this big, like, I can't even explain it, this big, just this huge Jeep type vehicle comes pulling up, and it's got machoman.com on the side, and comes pulling up in the dark, and the door opens, and it's Macho Man Randy Savage. And he comes over, and he says, Ronnie, is it okay if I have a few words with the people? So I grab him and I run in the building, and I'm waiting for the match to end. Who I can't remember at this time what was in the ring. I don't even want to bullshit. But they finished up, the crowd pops, everyone's happy, very sentimental night. And then the music hits, and Macho Man Randy Savage walks into my ring in my building and cuts the most motivating, inspirational promo anybody could possibly have hoped for. Walked back, gave me the mic, he walked out the door, and he drove away. I couldn't have dreamt of or booked a more perfect and unbelievable Earth 2 type situation. I couldn't believe what was happening in my building and on such an important show. I could never top anything as huge as that, ever.
Wow, that's huge. That's huge.
You know, and another, as far as matches, the NWA 53rd anniversary was coming to Tampa. And the NWA president, Howard Brody, was in charge. So everybody on planet Earth should have known it was going to be a fucking train wreck, and he would blow it. And he booked the Tampa Convention Center. No tickets sold. Nobody gave a shit. And for whatever reason, he dreamt up it was supposedly the venue was pulled out from underneath them, which was the Tampa Convention Center, which was way too big for an indie show at that time. Nobody here. For me to get people in the seats at IPW, I'm not going to act like these people were breaking the door down. It took effort to get them in there, and I had to bring in some real shit. And I had TV at the time on UPN for over 2 years. Well, anyway, the convention center yanks out the carpet from underneath them. I step up immediately, offer the Florida WrestlePlex, and this show just murders. But that was the night that Shinya Hashimoto from 01 faced Steve Corino at my building at the NWA 53rd anniversary, and they had in about 125-degree heat in that sweat box in the middle of the summer in Florida. Hashimoto nearly killed Corino, and Steve took all of it, and he took more and begged for more. It was the most epic, emotional shit I've ever seen in my life. And from that point forward, Steve Corino was not only a regular in 01, but he was a star. He was brought in as somebody to obviously pay respect to and to understand he's not, he was never an underneath guy, but it was like he started out as a top guy because of he sacrificed his entire body and everything that he loves for that match. And I was there to witness it. And it was probably one of the most epic things I've ever seen in my life, wrestling or not. It was hard to explain.
Awesome. Excellent. Thank you for sharing. The next question I got lined up here is about booking. What is your personal booking philosophy, in how you go about mapping out angles? What is your process like in comparison to others?
I really rely a lot on Wrestling 101 and going with basic shit that it's simple. I'm the bad guy, you're the good guy, I don't like you, and this is why. Or I'm the bad guy and you're the good guy and you got the belt and I want it. It's that simple. And I've always tried to stay away the best I can from hot shotting, because short-term hot shot, like really crazy angles, can spike the houses and get the interest or whatever. But what are you sacrificing long-term? So I had I had the luxury at the time of where I had my own building. Plus I had a ton of towns, so I could run as much as I could afford to run. So I could stretch angles out, you know, over the long term, where also the blow off would want to be seen in each town. So, you know, my philosophy was, if it's not going to put asses in the seats, well, what are we doing? You know, so that was what everything came down to. No matter how cool I thought something might be, or it might pop me because it's funny, if it wasn't going to make money, I really truly tried to stay away from it.
Fair enough. Excellent stuff. Now I want to kind of talk about talent and managing talent. I want to know about, you know, who during that time would you say was the most difficult talent to work with, and also who would you say was somebody that you really enjoyed having as a talent taking direction from you?
It's funny because I still say this to this day, but some of the most difficult guys and girls I've ever dealt with are the ones that don't belong there in the first place. That I don't know if they snuck in the back door, or they caught me on the right day, or, you know, something about them that I like, that I spend, you know, considerable time to try to get them over and to help them expand. There's a certain group that they just never will appreciate it. They resent you for needing you, and they'll remind you at every single time that they're, you know, that they can, especially when your back is turned. On the flip side, you know, I was lucky enough to deal with guys like Scoot Andrews and Steve Madison and Mike Sullivan, who, I mean, I think he might be the nicest guy that's ever been in professional wrestling. You know, he got to wrestle at Madison Square Garden against Loki, you know, and he's a fireman here in St. Pete, along with Steve Madison. These guys they're legit heroes. They're not your typical dirtbag wrestlers. Nothing against the dirtbag wrestlers, because we need them too. You know, I mean, it wouldn't be wrestling if it wasn't for the carny maniacs that are attracted to this. But it's always a pleasure to deal with the guys that are easier, but it's a little bit of a challenge and exciting to deal with the nutcases too. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes even the most difficult talent to work with can be absolutely brilliant. That's a part of their brilliance, because they are a difficult and layered kind of human being. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I just thought that would be interesting to ask you about, because, you know, managing people can be very difficult and you know, interesting. I want to bring up the Shane twins, because I've had them on the show. Love them, great guys. Wanted to see if you could give me some fun stories about your time with the Shane twins.
Yeah, we did so much together, almost from their first day out of wrestling school. I was aware of them and what they're doing. And then Dean Malenko asked me to come to school one time, and I got to see Mike and Todd. And then, of course, Jet Jaguar, Tony Mamaluke, Jeremy Lopez. This class was just, Chad Collier was part of it too. And he was ultra talented. He did some stuff over in, I want to say, Michinoku Pro. He was over there as Metal Masters, and Jeremy Gomez was Black Tigers over there. We had guys like Navy SEAL that got to wrestle over in Battle Arts. We just did, you know, so much cool stuff. One of the things that, you know, I'm sorry going off a side tangent here, but even when I was a young guy, I always liked the idea of helping young guys and recognizing talent, you know, and pulling them up if you had the opportunity to do it. And then also being willing and disciplined enough to cut the cable if they clearly didn't get it. Because I've had guys come across, you know, my eyes over the years countless times where I'm like, this guy's got it. And within 5 minutes, I knew he might have it, but he ain't got it mentally. You know what I mean? Because this is a tough business. And if you're not willing to grind and put up with some serious politics, even at the, you know, indie level, it's you got to be mentally tough, or it'll just chew you up and spit you out. It really will.
So yeah, as I was asking about with the Shane twins, did you have any stories about?
I'm sorry, I went off on a tangent there. Mike and Todd, we go back. I started talking about them coming out of school. We go back, and I was just with Mike at the New Japan Pro Wrestling show in St. Pete on Sunday. I was with him. You should listen to this crowd. We were just hanging around, shooting the shit and having fun and watching the show. But at one point, standing with us was Mike Shane, Jet Jaguar, Bam Neely, which you remember from WWE, Cuban Assassin and Fantasy, which you'd remember from take your pick, mainly the World Wrestling Council, but all over the world. And then Lenny Lane shows up out of nowhere. I ain't seen Lenny Lane in like 20 years. And he just shows up. I didn't know he lives here. And then me and Mike from Disorderly Conduct, it was Mr. Hattori is in the building. It was just like this incredible deal. That's a good explanation of like, me and Mike just decided we were going to meet over at the show, and Jet Jaguar was coming with us. And it ended up just this great day, great stories. Because of the Shane brothers, I got to go to Puerto Rico with Jimmy Hart with the XWF WWC invasion, where the Shanes managed by me faced the Reggaetones, which was the Headhunters, and they were managed by Joe Don Smith, and they were long-term hardcore bloodbath heels that were doing like this reggae babyface gimmick. And I don't know if you remember the Headhunters, but they were like little tiny miniature Abdullah the Butchers. They were like 5 foot nothing and weighed like 400 pounds, but would do moonsaults. But they'd also go through glass and barbed wire and all that crazy shit before that was normal. Me and the Shanes together, we went to very, very early Combat Zone Wrestling, where they wrestled the Haas brothers in a match that was just years ahead of its time. I ended up getting all fucked up from a chair shot and had to get my head stapled shut in the back that night. And Zandig came by and gave me a big thumbs up and a wink of approval, as only Zandig can do. I got to see Mike and Todd, do stuff with the XWF. The WWF finally gave them an opportunity. They were well on their ways to winning the tag belts, doing cool shit with it was Brian Kendrick and Paul London.
Yeah.
And then Todd suffered the injury, and that was it. I think because of their age, and they kind of came in on a higher guarantee than most developmental guys, they decided to cut bait. And I think that was a loss for the WWE or WWF at the time, because Mike and Todd they're 320-pound identical twins they're more jacked than you could possibly imagine, and they move like cruiserweights. We did a show back in, I think it was 99, called Break the Barrier, and it was at the ECW Arena in Philly. And It was the Shanes against the Pitbulls. And the Pitbulls did not want to cooperate. They didn't want to put the Shanes over. So it was very interesting, but it was a good experience for us. And whenever either one of them was down from injuries, I'd push the other. As at one time, Mike held the IPW TV title. Todd held the NWA Florida Heavyweight Championship. So even if one was down, I would just keep us hot by pushing the other one as a singles, because they're freak athletes. They were NCAA scholarship tennis players, believe it or not, in college. And then, found wrestling and weightlifting afterwards, and they're fucking monsters. But behind the scenes, probably the biggest nice guys you'll ever meet. And being honest with you, I don't think that helped them. They'd have been better off being big, bully assholes. They'd probably still be making money, but I wouldn't trade my time. We spent so much time on the road, whether it was in cars or airplanes or whatever the fuck it took. We were going to get there. Going to the Pro Wrestling Illustrated offices together. To this day, we root for our kids. They're his kids. Mike's kids are scholarship athletes. Todd's kids are going to be no different. My kids are kick-ass jocks, and we've been cheering for our own kids the whole time. And I think I'll be with those guys in one form or another until the day I die.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. It's really nice to hear. And I agree, they are two fantastic gentlemen. Back to IPW Hardcore. Sorry, again, I kind of feel like I've skimmed over a lot for this company, because it was a big part of your time in pro wrestling. But from what you have said, from what Jet Jaguar has said, the Shane twins, everyone that I've talked to about this company, all they said was it was a great run that the company had. There was always people packed into the building. What led to the company merging with NWA Florida, and what kind of led to IPW Hardcore being no longer an entity?
I started just trying to run shows that we had so much going on. Our schedule was so busy. We had TV, we had the school, the pressure, the whole time I was working a shoot job and really not making real money. And the wrestling indie, money at the time was, to say it was terrible would be an understatement. So there was always more coming out than there was going in. and we had one gigantic failure that was just too much, and knee-jerk reaction. I said, we're done. And it wasn't the wrong decision. It was the only decision, but there was no real buildup. It was always tough. It was always impossible. It was always one gigantic failure away from completely being done, or one gigantic success from, surviving another X amount of months, or maybe, taking it to the next level. I mean, we had some shows, there was a couple shows at the Pinellas Expo Center. I had 1,000 people there, and my word doesn't mean anything, if you don't, in wrestling, people throw around figures like that and they're so full of shit. I don't say it unless I can reference it. It's all right there on YouTube. And, I bring in legends like Abdullah the Butcher, Kevin Sullivan. I was lucky enough on one show to have X-Pac against Kurt Hennig in the main event. And Kurt Hennig was brought to the ring by Bobby the Brain Heenan while Macho Man was sitting across the building signing autographs. I mean, I was doing shit that I had no business being able to do because I didn't have the money, but I had the heart. And when I'd meet these people, they see that I was trying, do the right thing, and to give the Florida talent a stage where maybe they didn't have the type of buzz of fans in the Northeast. The Southeast fans just don't do it. They still don't to this day. So I was trying, I bring in Chris Daniels, AJ Styles was my champion for a while. He'd come in and just work with everybody, and he wasn't afraid to put people over on the way out either. So it was like this who's who of the best at the time that were just getting discovered. They knew this was the place to be. There was no money, but the exposure that came out of it, and the camaraderie and the long-term relationships, like that show I mentioned in Philly for Break the Barrier. That was the first time that I met Reckless Youth, Mike Quackenbush, a very, very young Trent Acid, Justice Payne and his brother Nick Gage, Zandig, Wife Beater. I met all those guys. Don Montoya was at that show. And then you had legends like Abby. Shane Douglas was there to put bowls, whoever. But to be able to sit there and say that I met those guys that long ago, and the amount of them that went on to be stars, or, the ones that I'm still, loosely in contact with, that show, it wasn't well ran, and it didn't draw like it should have, but it was a who's who of who's gonna be who later, in American independent wrestling.
Awesome. I wanted to ask one final question about IPW Hardcore before moving on to other subjects. Will there ever be a documentary on IPW Hardcore wrestling? I asked Jet Jaguar this, but now I'm asking you.
If somebody was to approach me on it, but we have so much footage, and so many of the key guys are still available to talk to, but I don't have the time or money to do it. It would be a labor of love, but I'm 52 years old, and I've paid my dues. If somebody wanted to do it, I would be probably the biggest fan of it, of course. But as far as, I don't have time or money to do it.
No problem. Okay. I want to ask about the XWF. I know you did this thing in Puerto Rico with the XWF, but when they first initially did those tapings, were you involved at all with the XWF at that time?
I was there, and I did a lot to get them like enhancement guys, and to line that up, and to line up just logistics and equipment. But for whatever reason at the time, the Nasty Boys weren't the biggest fan of me, and really kept the door closed, even though the Shanes were there. I was there at the tapings. I'm there the whole time. But they kept me from, I think there was a lot of, back then, the old school teams knew that the Shanes couldn't be manipulated when I was around, because I handled a lot of the business, and I wasn't afraid to speak up to guys that were 4 times my size, that this doesn't, work for what we're trying to do with the Shanes. Mike and Todd were so eager to please that they would go along with whatever these veterans who would say, because they would assure them they're looking out for the best interest. Brian Knobs knew that, and so did Jerry Sags. I love those guys, but they knew that if I was involved, I wasn't going to let a lot of shit go on that was. So they kind of would make my life miserable and hope to chase me off, but it didn't. And then later on, Jimmy Hart did so much shit for me that, missing out on those tapings, I was there, so I got to share in the excitement of, friends of mine getting an opportunity. But later to go to Puerto Rico for the XWF with the same group of guys, and to go down there and act like an animal like anybody else used to with Puerto Rico. It was all right. I was willing to sacrifice and eat a little bit of shit, you know?
Yep, fair enough. I wanted to bring up TNA. Again, research that I've done, I found a website that stated that you starting to do some work for TNA in their early days. So I want to know how that came about, and also if it was true that you had an altercation with Johnny Fairplay.
Yeah, I always sent, when they started at the fairgrounds, Bill Behrens from NWA Wildside was in charge of booking the enhancement, and he had his hand in a million different things. But me and Bill have always worked together, and he was nice enough to give me the opportunity to send. I literally sent everybody to, to Nashville that wanted to go. Everybody. They were able to go and get national TV time for the first time and get seen. And a few guys like Jarrell Clark and Mikey Batts, who's Kidman's cousin, got actual opportunities and, were signed and performed there for a while. But when they moved to Orlando, I started working as gorilla position next to Jerry Jarrett. And, great opportunity. And again, I still would bring the enhancement guys, and they tell me how many they need, and I tell them who's coming and the whole deal. And everything was going along great. And we always went to Miller's Ale House on International Drive in Orlando after every show, and I always went. I partied heavy, and even though I wasn't a regular, I just really didn't care who was around, and if they liked me, that was cool, and if they didn't, whatever. I got along with everybody. But I walked up on this table one night. It was, I know it was Chris Harris, I think it was Lance Archer, and it might have been Shark Boy, but it was definitely Harris and Archer. And Johnny Fairplay is just shitting on Bobby the Brain Heenan. And it wasn't trying to be funny. He was just shitting on him. Like he's this pathetic old, character from the past that's outdated, and talk about how he's in the future. And I took exception to it. Bobby the Brain Heenan is the greatest wrestling manager in history, and probably one of the greatest commentators. And I would say one of the funniest people and sharpest people and most loyal people to professional wrestling that's ever came along. And I took exception when I went after him. And it was ugly because he was what he was at the time. He pressed charges, and that's how I ended up meeting my friend to this day, Jody Peterman, the attorney out of Georgia, hooked me up with an attorney here. And after going to court, I think it was 6 times, I'd show up, and Johnny would never be there because he was on the West Coast and he had no intentions of being there. Finally, they threw it out, and that was it. But yeah, he pressed assault and battery charges on me.
Wow, holy shit, I didn't realize it was going to be that kind of an altercation. But hey, he should have kept his mouth shut. You don't talk about Bobby Heenan like that and get away with it, as far as I'm concerned.
No, I don't care who you are, and what pissed me off even more, though, is these fucking guys that are stars now. And at the time they were getting, they're getting a decent opportunity in TNA. But how is you as a real professional wrestler getting paid and how are you listening to this fucking clown burying a legend like that? And even if you handle it, in a different, more, hey buddy, take it easy, however you want to do it. I've had friends say asshole shit before, and I put them back in place. That's just, it's the way it is, especially when booze is involved. But they were yucking it up because they were fucking marks for this D-level, reality show star, which at the time that was still kind of a, am I wrong? That was like the first or second Survivor or some shit like that. So that's going way back. I was still around, but it was so uncomfortable for me after that because he was Dixie Carter loved those reality guys and girls. And so he was in, and I was the dummy, getting a shitty payday to get enhancement talent lined up and tell people, hey, it's your fucking time, go. Jerry Jarrett would sit and laugh because he got a kick out of me. He just got a kick out of me, which was cool. But when I finally told them one day, hey, listen, they're changing my hours at work. For me to be able to keep doing this, I need to get X amount each time, and then I'll just supplement the rest by doing whatever I got to do. And they passed, and that was the end of my time in TNA.
Fair enough. So you brought up the gorilla position and working in that position. I've never actually had the chance to speak to somebody who's been in that role before. So for the layman out there, the wrestling fan layman out there that may not understand exactly what duties go into that job, what goes into working at the gorilla position?
Well, with TNA at the time, it was taped, but it was live to tape, so there was no time to waste. So you're usually like, the old TNA tunnel, that deal. I'd be on the bottom of the steps standing next to Jerry, who'd be giving me the cues. And when I tell you, you got to go, you got to go. And if there was anything special that Jerry would tell me, okay, there's been this change, watch for this, or, whatever I needed to communicate to the talent that was going out there, I'd be at, and you got to go, and the only guy that ever fucked with me once, and it was a test, and I think I passed, but it was right in the middle of some hot and heavy deal, and Raven was standing right next to me, and I said, go. And he sat there, and I fucking slapped on the ass, go, you're up. And he sat there, and I fucking grabbed him, and I said, go. And he smiled and gave me a wink, and he went. He probably wouldn't even remember that, but that was, something where I go, okay, well, I think I handled that right. He didn't get mad at me. I don't think I disrespected him. He listened to me, but he was willing to see, I think, was I going to be willing to, make that type of call with any type of authority? He could have sat there and still looked at me, but then he would have had to deal with Jerry at that time. So it was a good experience. It was a little gut wrenching, because times meant everything. And if you had D-Ray 3000 or whatever the fuck he was called, going against somebody and they went 2 minutes long, now the next match has got to shave 2 minutes. Shit's happening on the fly. So there was a lot of trust. I loved being there. I thought it was a great experience. I learned a lot about TV that I didn't know, but I also learned when I tried to make a stand that I was interchangeable. As soon as I said I need this, I was gone, and somebody else was filling the role, and they're still on TV. So clearly I wasn't that missed, but it was a good experience, and I thank Jeff Jarrett a lot for that too. He was very cool to me. He then later came and defended the NWA World Heavyweight title for me on a NWA Florida show against Rod Steele in Pinellas Park, where Steve Carino was involved. And but the way I was back then is I booked him, I paid him a really big payday, which he deserved, and he drew for me too. But at the time, I took it very personal because I didn't feel that we were getting the respect, and I wasn't getting the respect that I deserved. Yet none of the NWA territories would bring in the tag or the world champ, because they were, truthfully, most of them were little local shit shows with no budget, and they weren't going to spend any money to try to, I'm like, listen, the Shane brothers are the world tag champs. Jarrell Clark's the world junior heavyweight champ, and I'm bringing in Jeff Jarrett as the world heavyweight champ. What more do I fucking need to do? Give us some respect.
Fair enough. I want to ask you about Deep South Wrestling and doing some commentary work there in December 2005. What was how did this opportunity come about? And please tell me the tale of your time there.
It was when the Shane brothers were brought in there. They immediately dropped my name to Bill DeMott, and Bill was nice enough to let me come up there and meet him. I guess I didn't rub him the wrong way, because I was invited to come back every week after that, and I would do. There was no TV. We were taping everything, but there was no TV. But the tapes were still going to the office, so they could, basically check on the progress of all these students and prospects that they had signed down there. And it didn't matter who was in what angle, didn't matter who was out sick, didn't matter who was available. Jody would not put me on the main show. And while I love, and respect wrestling, and I understand that Jody Hamilton and the Assassins were probably the biggest drawing tag team in the history of at least regional pro wrestling, to me, he felt out of touch. He felt bitter. He felt angry. He always preached against the WWE and that we were for Deep South and not WWE. And he would never give me a chance, no matter what. No matter what Bill did, like it was like playing chess. He kept taking himself out of position to do commentary, because they would use Bill too. And then they would put Nigel Sherrod in there, who did a good job. Or if Nigel wasn't available or Matt wasn't, they'd have a wrestler as a guest comment. And I finally said, fuck it, I've had enough, man. Are you ever going to put me on this TV show? And Jody told me no. And I said, thanks for everything. And I left. I appreciated the opportunity, and it was fun. but I was killing myself to do it. There was no money, and I was at the the disposal of a guy who clearly didn't want me on the show. And we never had any disagreements, and there was never any cross words, but he didn't give a fuck about anybody. And I wasn't assigned talent, and he clearly wasn't a big fan of my style, but yet he didn't tell me to beat it. And I seen other people told to get lost. So I knew he thought I had some value. He just wasn't going to give me the opportunity. And sometimes you got to be able to read the writing on the wall, and it was time to go.
Yep, understood. Okay, well, another thing I want to bring up, which I messaged you about the other day, I was excited to learn a little bit about this, the World Wrestling Legends pay-per-view, the 605 reunion. You have the opportunity to work with Jim Cornette and Lance Russell on commentary for this show. You did say the show was a little bit of a nightmare. Also, you were involved behind the scenes with it as well. Please tell me a little bit about this show. I've never had the chance to talk to anybody that was a part of it, but I've always been quite interested.
If you're reading my sign language, I'm telling my dogs and my son who are coming through the front door to take it easy. But the XWF deal was, I mean, potentially because of the money that was behind it, and all this shit we had at our disposal could have been such a big deal. Peach, stop it. It could have been such a big deal. But it was like, I don't know what it was, but did you watch it? After I showed you where you haven't seen it yet?
I hadn't had the chance to, unfortunately.
It's a different level of bad. And the matchmaking, it was guys that just couldn't do anything in the ring anymore, or it was guys that could but mismatched with the wrong people. And it was like they pushed the 605, the reunion, like it was, if I'm a guy on the outside, I'm going, okay, well, this is gonna be a WCW Saturday night reunion show. There was Armstrong brothers, there's Nikolai Volkov and Iron Sheik, there's a Vampiro, there's Bruno Sammartino, Kamala. It was like this hodgepodge, weird, no sense whatsoever booking ideas. And it was this guy, Colin Bowman, that used to work for WCW magazine, that was really good friends with Jimmy Hart, and Jimmy trusted him to book and put this show together. And it was a fucking mess. And then they didn't have any clearance for any of the pay-per-view providers, and nobody knew it was coming. So all of a sudden, day of the show, they're out in front of the Hard Rock, trying to pay for it to get people to come in and see this show, and nobody's watching it, nobody's ordering it, and even if they wanted to, they couldn't. It was so weird, but yet I got to sit there for 3 hours and call matches with Lance Russell, Jim Cornette, and even Corey Macklin, from Memphis. It was a dream come true for me. I made a shit ton of money because of Jimmy Hart. As a matter of fact, I've never came close to making as much money in one show as I did then, before or after. And it's been a very long time. So these people were just burning money. They're pissing it away. And they taped the show. Nobody watched it. Nobody knew how to get it. And then it went in Cannes, and it went under before it got started. And that was it. So it's like this, it's almost like this forgotten show that you'd have to kind of know about to know that it ever happened. And there was another disaster of a legend show that was a lot worse, that has a higher reputation. It's easier to find for all the wrong reasons. But all I know is Jimmy Hart had the faith in me to sit me down with Jim Cornette. I could sit and listen to his podcast, for days now. But back in the day, as far as a manager, good luck finding anybody quicker or sharper or wittier and willing to take, the shit off the scaffold. One of the greatest angles of all time was the original Midnight Express attacking the Midnight Express and Jim Cornette in the WCW studios. And Corny got the heavy color from the shot with the cell phone, which a cell phone back then was about that big, So to be able to sit there with those guys and to meet some of these legends, and more so I had friends that were playing the role of Friday with you, Kamala. I had guys that got to referee. I had guys got to do security. Everybody got paid. And it was a nice atmosphere, but it was pretty clear it was a train wreck when it was going on.
Right. Yes, I will get around to watching it because I'm very intrigued by it. And I know that what the other Legends pay-per-view you're talking about, I'm sure it's the one with the infamous Jake Roberts.
Oh, man. I've been trying to burn that from my memory from the time I seen it years ago. Yeah, it was nothing like that. It wasn't gross or pathetic. It was just mismatches and stuff. You really need to look, even if you just look at the results, they're totally insane. Like Virgil against random person. I think Rick Steiner is against some random guy. Nobody's random. Like, they don't matter. They just, like, they booked 20 something guys, dumped their name into a hat and pulled them out and said, okay, here's the show. That's what it looked like.
That's what the results look like to me, because I was like, Coco Beware versus Disco Inferno.
But we also know, as far as positive though, Chris Canyon was part of that show, and he worked his ass off, and he was a total pro. I was very lucky to be able to use him in IPW Hardcore Wrestling. Matter of fact, he had a singles match. I want to say it was with Mike Chen, and he worked other guys for me, would insist on putting the other guy over. So I think he came out on that show, if I remember correctly. I'm almost positive that's where, which again, it made it almost more sad, because the idea was there was going to be a lot of eyes on it, and if he was going to make this, insanely life-changing, brave statement, you would hope that there would have been an audience. And, it was still cool. The story's there. It's true. He did it. Everybody supported the guy. I don't know anybody that ever met Chris Canyon that didn't say what a great guy, but also an ultra talented and very innovative wrestler. I really miss him.
Absolutely. Yeah. Everyone that I've had on the show that has mentioned him has always said something nice about him. And yes, again, just to kind of put a bow on the World Wrestling Legend 605 reunion pay-per-view, it's true. Like I thought I was expecting people that had been on WCW Saturday Night that was well known for being on that show. That's what I was looking for when I saw the card.
And that was the idea. And they just went into who's available. Hey, what? Okay, Bobby Heenan, we'll put him with the Armstrongs. Right? It would just be this insane shit. But as far as, again, the ability to be on a show with guys like that, where that wasn't normal to have that level of names available, it would have been nice to. Sorry if you hear one of my dogs drinking, sounding like they're a camel over there. Dallas, what are you doing?
It's okay.
What an animal. Jeez. I don't think she's drank since 9 o'clock this morning. Sorry.
That's fine. No problem. Again, back to IPW Hardcore. I noticed in my research, 2012, 2 shows in 2018, 3 shows in 2019. Some like reunion shows, I suppose you would call those. How did those shows go after, being away from IPW Hardcore for some time there? Will you ever promote another show under that name again?
It's kind of hard now, because if I run it as IPW Hardcore Wrestling now, it's literally the name just kind of being thrown out there, because the guys, everyone's so old. I could every once in a while I'll get Steve Madison or Lex Lovett or Scoot Andrews, or they'll be willing to come in. The only way they'll do it is if they're in tip-top shape. Otherwise, they will not, do the show. So it just was time to move on. But some of the reunion shows that I like, there's been a few shows that I really didn't run as the biggest deal. I would put IPW Hardcore Wrestling, but like Days of Future Past from a few years, it's Scoot Andrews against Austin Theory. It's Sideshow against Darby Allin. The End is in there. It's a who's who. Wow. I mean, these guys are. Austin Theory is going to be main event in WrestleMania in the next few years. Darby Allin is a top. Last night he's teaming with the Hardys and Sting. Yeah. How much more of a rub can you be given? So again, and Joey Janela was supposed to be on that show too, and had to cancel the night before because he was stuck on the West Coast. But it's literally a who's who. Effie was on that show as well. Now that I think about it. I still think I have an eye for what it's going to take as far as guys to get to the next level. But I don't think if I'm running as IPW Hardcore, that's the thing to do. People want to see the originals. Billy Five still got some in the gas tank whenever I need them. There's a few guys like that out there, but it's few and far between. I got Scoot Andrews is wrestling for Expect the Unexpected up in Jersey in a couple weeks.
Wow.
Crazy that he's coming back, you know. But me and him, his daughters cheered for the same team here in Florida that my daughter cheers for. His wife is a teacher at the school that my son goes to, and me and him go back almost 20 years now. And you're gonna find very few people are as big as supporters as the Black Nature Boy, Scoot Andrews, as me. And if he came along, let's say if AEW and that had came along during our run, Scoot would be a top guy that you're watching on TV making millions every week because he's that fucking good.
Absolutely. I'm a massive fan of Scoot. He's also a fantastic human being. I've had him on the show.
He's the best.
I always sing his praises anytime I can. We're getting towards the tail end here, Ron. Really appreciated your time. This has been really good fun. And I know that there's so much more that we could have discussed on this episode. So hopefully I can have you back on someday. But a few questions here. What are your thoughts on the state of the wrestling business today?
I think there's more money to be made than there's ever been, because of the value of content. And I think things are happening for indie level and international talent that is unprecedented and never seen before. But on the flip side, the WWE's probably putting out the worst show they've ever put out, and they're making more money than they've ever made. So if I was to be a betting man, and I've been doing this 30 years at a lot of people would say the fringe or the indie level, but I'm going to tell you that if I thought anybody other than WWE was going to be left standing tall at the end of this, I clearly haven't been paying any attention because they're making more revenue streams appear by the day, and it's by putting out garbage content that nobody wants to see. They seem to resent their fans. They seem to resent their talent, and it's paying more than it's ever paid. I do think AEW is providing an insane alternative, but I also believe that they're going to rack up a body count on injuries that's never been seen before. And they've also announced a world shattering announcement every week about somebody signing that you don't see 2 weeks later. The cupboards are stocked to a point of ridiculous, but there ain't enough fucking TV time to feature all this talent. So how long that can last, I think there was a big mistake made last night where Adam Cole never won shit on AEW. He ends up getting a title match anyway. So now we're establishing that the company who says they're based on wins and losses and they're trying to present it more, we're throwing that out the window because the guy who's been doing nothing but doing jobs is now getting a title match. But yet last night he's on there against Jay Lethal, a Ring of Honor legend and champion. And of course, Jay Lethal goes under to Adam Cole. So you got two legit hot world champion type material that you've killed them dead. And to see what they did with the women's championship last night in some insanely racially insensitive angle in 2022, I gotta be wondering what the fuck they're smoking there, because I'm not against them. But if what happened last night during the women's title segment happened on WWE, the AEW fans would be in the streets with pitchforks and torches trying to chase Vince McMahon out of town. It was terrible. They blew it.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, you're right in everything that you've just said there. As far as I'm concerned, I support AEW. I want them to do good for the boys and the girls that are in the business. But AEW frustrates me. WWE, as far as I'm concerned, I've been done with them for a long time. But AEW, they frustrate me because I want them to do good, but geez, I mean, I looked at the card for the show for Dynamite this week, and I looked at the card. I'm like, I know who's winning every single match ahead of time. It's a foregone conclusion every single time.
You also know a run-in on every match, and goofy ass I'd call it comedy, but it's not funny, and I got a weird sense of humor. So, like, I think Danhausen's funny as shit. I'm in the right, same as Orange Cassidy, but I don't want to see Orange Cassidy in title matches and stuff either. I'd rather he be the comedy character he is, doing what could be best equated to some of the greatest stunts wrestling has ever seen. I just don't want to be watching the TV when that stunt goes wrong and he falls straight on his head with his hands in his fucking pockets,
Yeah, good call, bro. But yeah, I want them to succeed, but geez, the earth-shattering announcements and some of the booking is questionable, and WWE is just
Hey, there's plenty of indie wrestling out there though, man. And
certainly.
I don't own it and I ain't making no money off of it. But if you're not a subscriber of IWTV for what they, $9.99 a month, I subscribe. You know what I mean? Mostly just to watch myself because, I'm an egomaniac and I like to listen to shit that I think is pretty funny that I say. But of course I appreciate the guys and girls I work with too. But IWTV, you're talking about thousands of hours of wrestling. WZWA Network, even. I mean, on Peacock, they're practically for $5 or $10 or whatever. There's so much wrestling. If I would have had this shit when I was a kid, I never would have left the house. So I'm lucky that it wasn't available. All I got was my AWA, and then later Southwest Championship Wrestling on USA Network before WWF took it over, and we were off and running. And then I got the Superstation TBS where I could see WCW Saturday Night and Power Hour and all that other shit. I hope wrestling stays hot. I hope indie guys and girls can make money. I do believe at the end of the day, though, when people think of professional wrestling and when they decide long term to spend their money on wrestling, it's going to be what the WWE is. That's what people think wrestling is. And I think when these fans with AEW grow out of these kids are going to get older. The guys are going to find girlfriends. You know what I mean? Some of the favorites are going to be turned on by the Twitterverse. They're going to cancel. There's a lot of that coming, a lot of it. When you embrace that, these fuckers eat their own. So while you're sitting back and think you're riding the wave and you're, woke or in most point, pretend woke, and you think you're shitting on everybody together, those fuckers turn their sights on you for some mistake you made in the past. It's over and it's coming, and you can see little hints of it, so I don't know. I don't wish that. I hope AEW, if they took over, I'd love to see a Monday Night War situation all over again, like it was back with Raw and Nitro. That was, being a wrestling fan then, holy Christ, it was insane,
Absolutely. That was when I first became a fan, was, around 97, 1998, and it was huge. Two more questions before our final segment. What else do you hope to accomplish in pro wrestling at this point in your time in the business?
With me, it's simple, and this is not just in wrestling, but as a person, all I care about is that people remember me. And I do everything I can when it comes to pro wrestling to help others. When people are willing to help me, I appreciate it and I respect it. I want to leave wrestling better than it was when I found it. But I am old school. I'm not really the most, I guess, progressive when it comes to a lot of this shit. But I just want it, to be good for everybody. And if I get a couple more last hurrahs, I'll be appreciative. But I'm as busy as I want to be. I work where I want to work. Most people that don't want me, I don't want to work for them anyway. I'm too old for WWE to finally, give me an opportunity, and they've always been aware of what I do anyway. So, if I can be on the high end of the independent level, I'm very happy with that. And truthfully, I'm going through a big change right now that there's no telling where I could show up as soon as next week. You never know.
Excellent. I wanted you to have the opportunity to plug anything that you're doing today, anything that you'd like to get out there. I know you've been doing some commentary for ICW No Holds Barred. Here's the floor for you and the opportunity to plug anything you'd like.
No, Jeff, literally yesterday just left ICW No Holds Barred, but
right.
Of those guys, that is home to me. I love the talent. I love Danny. The fans treat me like I'm a legend, which I'm truthfully not used to. I'm treated with a lot of respect here in Florida and wherever I go, but it's just different with them. Those fans they know their history and they respect it. Those guys are doing some special things. I still have a relationship with Sal from the World Wrestling Network. So you'll see me show up on FIP shows, which again, you can WWNlive.com. You can subscribe there. Their library when it comes to FIP, ACW, Shine. I wish I could say Evolve, but they sold Evolve to WWE, which luckily for me is how I got to finally be on the WWE Network when they started releasing the Evolve and then the ICW shows from overseas. But me and Lenny being on WWE Network, and they never cut out our ring, and like we did the opening of each show in the ring. I figured that'd be the first thing they cut. They didn't. So I'll always be thankful. I don't like Gabe. He's not a friend of mine, but he had a lot of trust in me, and Sal to this day keeps me around. So other than that, you can find me on Facebook and Twitter, and I'm selling some cool merchandise if anybody wants a t-shirt or a hoodie or anything. But I'm just grinding, dude. I'm grinding just like I was back in '91. I'm older. I'm tougher than most. I've seen everybody come and go. I've outlasted everybody. I haven't been the guy that been able to walk down the ramp at WWE, but that probably benefits everybody, because I would have lost my fucking mind if somebody would have told me I was an international star. I still got my wife. I still got my kids. I still got my health. I wouldn't have had none of that if I made it to the next level. So, things happen for a reason. I'm not a religious guy, but I believe in fate, and I believe in karma, and I believe that things, it comes back around. So when you take care of people and you treat people right and you give a fuck and you care about what you do and you believe in what you do, good things happen to you.
Excellent, bro. Excellent. And everyone out there, everything that Ron has just mentioned, you'll find in the description when this finally goes out on YouTube, and you can find everything there. Ron Niemi, finally, now we're getting to the end of the interview here. We've got one final segment of the show. It's called 5 Second Frenzy. The idea is that you answer each question within 5 seconds, but it's okay if you take a little bit longer than that.
Okay.
First question here, Ron Niemi. Who is your favorite professional wrestler of all time?
Abdullah the Butcher.
Excellent. Favorite match of all time that you have witnessed in pro wrestling?
I'm a huge fan of the Steve Austin Bret Hart double turn deal. It's epic. I probably have watched Hulk Hogan beat Iron Sheik for the WWF title 100 times. It's an epic match. Forget about what's happened technically. Just the heat in that building and the love for Hulk Hogan and the hatred for the Iron Sheik was amazing. And Shawn Michaels and Scott Hall ladder matches, epic. I could go on forever, but those three are they're big deals.
Yep, excellent. The next question, I guess I would rephrase it from usual. When you were managing or doing anything in the ring, who was somebody that you would say was like your favorite person to work with, your favorite adversary to have?
I worked really, really well with Mike Sullivan, whether he would be a heel as Iron Mike Sullivan or a baby face as Freedom Rider. We played off each other real well, but we also were willing to take and give a lot more than any reasonable person would accept, as far as just insane levels of violence when it was necessary. But we had a real strong chemistry. And Jet Jaguar, me and him, to this day, I don't know how we didn't make it anywhere together, because we were, I think, one of the best comedy acts going on, but we also were very, very tough. And when you were fighting him, you were fighting me too. And when you were in the middle of it, it felt like that was actually happening. And it was special. It meant something. And it pissed off a lot of people, but that's just the way it was.
Excellent, excellent. Getting away from wrestling now, what is your favorite book?
My favorite book?
Yeah.
The Stand by Stephen King. It's the best.
Excellent. Favorite TV show?
I'm a huge fan of, there was a show on HBO years ago that only lasted a couple seasons called Carnival. That was it was just incredible. It was so good. Honestly, I think it was only 2 seasons, and that was definitely my favorite show of all time. It was great.
Awesome. The next one, favorite film?
Empire Strikes Back. It's the greatest movie that's ever been made.
Fantastic choice, bro. The next one is favorite musical artist.
Kiss, the greatest rock band in the history of rock and roll.
Good choice. I can see we've got a bit in common. Favorite food?
I'm a huge chicken wing fan, but my favorite food is turkey, and I have to have it every Thanksgiving and Christmas. And if I'm lucky, Easter too, but Terry usually makes ham then.
Fair enough. Favorite place to eat on the road?
We were just up in Tennessee, and we're lucky enough to eat at Cookout twice. Oh, I love this place. It's so good. It's so cheap, and it literally tastes like they got like grills in the back of the building, just making burgers and hot dogs, and it's basic shit, but it's really cheap and it's really, really good. I love it.
Yeah, that's my favorite kind of stuff too.
Mm-hmm.
The third last one here on 5 Second Frenzy, Ron, is your favorite alcoholic beverage.
Right now, I'm drinking a Vizzy, which is like a White Claw, and I'm kind of hooked on all these like pussy seltzer drinks. I spent many years drinking an insane amount of vodka with Red Bull and Monster, and I do love that. But I'm also not. I shouldn't be drinking vodka in anything, so I've kicked that, and I drink these seltzers. I like Bud Light as far as domestic trash beer, and I like all these seltzers. I literally don't care which one. Whoever's on sale, if it's White Claw, Vizzy's, Bud Seltzer, whatever's on sale, I'm buying, and then I drink it that night.
Yeah, no, I'm a big fan of the hard seltzers as well. I also like Rainbird. I don't know if you get Rainbird over there, but that's a pretty decent one. So it's at a good price, and it's about 6% alcohol. So it gives you a nice little hit. The second last one here, Ron. The naughtiest one of 5 Second Frenzy. Favorite female body part. You see a good looking lady. Where do the Ron Niemi eyes go to first?
Right there.
Excellent. And the last one here for 5 Second Frenzy, Ron. Favorite curse word.
Fuck. It works in everything. The infamous F word. Yeah. I've been known to spill them in from time to time. Maybe a little too often, some would say.
Yeah, definitely the number one answer for favorite curse word. Ron Niemi, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me here tonight for you, this morning for me. Really interesting to learn about some of your journey in the pro wrestling business. I'm sure there is so much more that we didn't get to cover, but I just want to let you know that I've appreciated your time. Everyone that I've had on the show that has worked with you sang your praises. So it was really nice to meet you and get the chance to learn about you. So thank you.
I appreciate. Hey, just to keep us out of trouble, that was big hands that I was talking about too. Just in case. I just want to clarify, but I appreciate it. I had a lot of fun. Maybe we can catch up another time and go over the later years. This was a lot of fun. Excellent,
Ron. Well, thank you very much.
Thanks, brother.
And thank you all out there for watching the Insider's Edge podcast here on the WZWA Network. I'm Karlifornia, alongside my new friend here, Ron Niemi, and we will see you down the road. Thank you.
Network, that's the way we like. Good God Almighty. Network, that's the way we like. Get puppies. Network, that's the way we like. Get.
The following announcement has been paid for by the WZWA Network.